Welcome to Becoming Church, the podcast where we discuss how the message and movement of Jesus is not just about becoming Christians, but about becoming the church. I'm your host, Kristen Mockler-Young, and I'm so glad you are joining the conversation. All right, friends, welcome back. I want you to think right now, right this actual second, about a parent that you know, because you are going to want to share this episode with them. And maybe, who knows, you're going to want to share this on social media and tag me and tag my guest, Mary Van Geffen. Mary!
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited
I feel like you are a spicy one interviewing a mom of a spicy one who's also a spicy one. So it feels very meta. I'm glad to be here.
It's just spicy all the way around, right?
Yes.
It's perfect. So how would you describe what it is that you do for people?
My mission in life is to help strong-willed children not grow up feeling wrong or broken by equipping their mothers to feel supported and seen and, and skill building. So that's kind of what I do. I used to do it primarily through one-on-one coaching. It's kind of blown up now. And now it's through my signature 8-week course, Moms of Spicy Ones. And then a lot of, free content on Instagram. So I'm just trying to help people normalize that they're, 1 in 5 kids is very different from the others. And it's not you, mom, or maybe it is you.
Yes. And I didn't prep you for this, but how did this come about? Did you see something in your own parenting or watching other people? How did you realize this is something that a lot of moms really needed help with?
Mostly because I figured out that I could not do it. And I had a child, who was spicy, and I was using all of the yelling, and I was getting into hitting, and I was out of my depths, and was feeling just the weight of what did other people think about this, and what was my kid and what was me. And then I was remembering that I too was kind of like this, and that this was a dance I was very familiar with, a mother who was disappointed in the largeness of her child. And it was sort of like, do I just want to continue this generational wounding and just add another person to the mix, or do I want to do something about it and grow from this? So it was really just coming to the end of my tether that I realized the work I needed to do. And then coming out of that, realizing I need to be the person that I couldn't find when I was like, hey, would someone come, tell me when my dog gets too annoying. I'm going to give him a quick treat. Please edit this out. This is me.
Mom's a spicy dog too.
With my spicy dog. But I was at this place where I was trying to find somebody who would come and observe her at preschool so they could see there was something I really wanted to clinicalize her and diagnose her with something. And it ended up, it was just, she is a intensely feeling, has a fierce drive for independence, isn't afraid to take up space or disappoint others, has this huge zest for life, which guess what? So do I. There's nothing wrong with her. Yeah. She will be one of the leaders of this country, but it's really hard to parent, especially when you believe that parenting means you're in control and you are getting first-time compliance. It's a real identity shaking enterprise.
Yeah. I've told you this before. I think that you are exactly who we need. And I feel like there's a generation of parents right now who a lot of us are the first one going, I don't want to just parent like everybody else has. And I see that there's something different to it, but I have no idea what to do. And so, man, there are days that I read. You put out so much fantastic content on Instagram. Guys, you have got to follow her. We'll link her all up in the show notes. But there are days that I look at your content and I just crack up laughing. And it is exactly what I needed that day. There are other days you have had me sobbing because I'm reading the comments, not as a parent, but as a child going, oh, wow, if only I had had someone tell me this, and it's just that perspective shift. I think that so many parents of this generation are looking for. So
Yeah,
thank
and
you on behalf of so many of us.
oh, of course. And that has been like a thing I didn't plan for. God has his own plans because there is a significant like cadre of folks following me who don't have kids, don't want to have kids, and they just are caring for the little person within them. And they're taking whatever encouragement I can provide, and they're encouraging themselves and speaking gently and sweetly and allowing big feelings within themselves. And I'm just so excited to see what this next generation, what they're going to be like as adults, because there's so much more freedom of expression and yet real care for the other that I'm noticing, at least in my silly teenagers.
Yeah, no, I see it too. I see it too. So you talk a lot about spicy ones. How somebody that maybe hasn't followed you, doesn't know of this concept, how do you know if you have a spicy one?
Okay.
I mean, you generally do, but
right. Not to be nasty, but you know if you have a spicy one. But for those that are like, oh, well, this is just more intellectual. What is it? It is a child who is usually highly sensitive, very persistent, kind of inflexible, intense. They're not afraid to negotiate with adults. They everything is sort of larger than it needs to be. They don't rest in contentedness. They can be the Eeyores, but they can also be the biggest celebrators. They are going to be the change makers, the free spirits, because they don't fit the box that they're supposed to be in. They sometimes hurt folks unintentionally. They kind of default to this brutal honesty, and they use powerful words that can wound or delight you. They're kind of the poets to come. They're very aware of other people's feelings, but they also miss a lot of the social cues when their peers are getting disgruntled. Cue me losing like 5 friends before I realized sort of the role I was playing in friendships. They can be incredibly sweet and loyal and loving, but they're always completely true to themselves. And when they're not, they end up having, health issues. They've got a subversive sense of humor. They misuse toys darkly. So we got to get over the fact that they wrote on the Barbie's face. They're so competitive that they melt down if they lose, or they just refuse to play. They don't play the games that would make them, because they're so highly sensitive to shame. They kind of see shame where it's not even happening. So we get weird feedback as a parent, like, oh my gosh, it feels like they're overreacting. I'd say the last couple of things is they can't be consoled physically. Like there's all these wonderful kids. It's like, you need a hug, don't you? If I said that, I would have gotten slapped in the face by my 6-year-old. Like, oh, wow. That just wasn't, that felt like her being cornered like an animal. So I had to give her more space. And they don't say, I love you until they feel it. They're just not trying to please you. And it's maddening. And can I just PSA, my child is amazing and is 18 and has just gotten into all these amazing colleges, has straight A's, does APs, is a fierce like champion of other people's rights. And there's nothing wrong with her.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people who have come from a very conservative environment of, like a child should be seen and not heard, they might have a fear that like, are you not doing enough for this kid? And there's this, it's an art, right? It's not like, oh, this is how you show up for this kid, but it really requires a relationship and knowing when you need to like set a boundary that you do not budge on, knowing that there's going to be a big old nuclear fusion around it. And when you say, you know what, I'm going to let this go because it's for the greatest good that I let it go. Yeah. So it can feel like inconsistent to other people, but there is a whole method behind it.
Yeah. And there, you just listed out so many characteristics of a spicy one, but I imagine that it doesn't always present exactly the same, right? Like there could be different personalities, different flavors of a spicy one.
Well, not only that, but sometimes what makes the relationship spicy is the mother, and the fact that the mother has a really high need for control or has some really unexpressed mother wounds of her own. Okay. And so you might describe your child as spicy, but if someone else were with them, they'd be like, oh yeah, it was no big deal. He didn't want to do this, so we did this other thing. Or she was hard to get to sleep until I said I would do the thing she wanted, So right. If other people don't struggle with this child as much, sometimes it's us. And not that we're doing anything wrong. It's that this child is inviting us on this journey to care less about what other people think and to check in more with ourselves and to care for ourselves and participate in the loving, because martyrs don't do well with spicy ones. It doesn't work out.
Yeah, I love that you keep saying the word control. This was something that I learned. I taught kindergarten for 12 years before I came into ministry. And really, it was the best thing that could have happened for my parenting, because I had to learn how to let go and all these different personality types. And, like I think a lot of pregnant women, I had all these ideas of what kind of parent I would be. And then I had my first child, and she's not even my spicy one. But I just remember coming home from the hospital thinking, I was going to be the mom that had her on a schedule, and my child would never sleep in my room and never sleep in my bed. And I had all of these things that were going to make her, the perfect daughter and all the whatever. And then she slept, Mary, on my chest for at least a month, if not longer. And I was like, all rules are out the window. Everything is different. I do whatever she needs. But that, I feel like, do you think that's the biggest, hardest thing for parents, is to let go of either the control or what they think is right?
I think that's it, but it's also letting go of the idol of managing other people's perceptions of us and our kid.
Oh, good one.
So there's a real dying to, and I'm using all my Christianese because I'm talking to you, but there's a dying to the part of you that wants other people to think you have it together. That because you did have a plan and you do want to do it a certain way, and now you have this other personality that's not letting you flourish in the way you did when it was just you. And so I think that is a big part, that you're disappointing others, you're exposed to judgment, whether it's strangers in Target or your own mother being like, you shouldn't let her do that, and so I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, man, that is so real. So there's got to be a spiritual element to this, to parenting a child that you can't control, or a child that doesn't fit into, the box that you want them to. But when you're in it, it's so hard to find, right? So enlighten us. What is the spiritual element to this?
Well, and the fact that, and you can delete this out if this feels too intense, but we've also been brainwashed a little bit in the church that the spiritual component is like, you need to break the will of this child. There's a lot of really yucky Christian parenting books that told us that, gave us the 3 steps for spanking, and or talked about how out of the heart comes such darkness. And that's a real narrow view of what the Bible tells us. So I feel like we come into this spiritual journey thinking it's a different spiritual journey. And what it really is we finally get to practice and receive unconditional love. And that is in itself like a spiritual discipline of being like, wow, this child is not earning my love or my affection right now, yet I am going to give it. I am not earning my own love and affection. Like, I don't like the mother I am right now. And yet, just like God does, I'm going to choose to love me and have compassion for me. And it's finding over and over again that voice of the Holy Spirit to see from a bird's eye view of what's going on, versus those negative, mean inner voices we have that are like, what's wrong with you? A good mother wouldn't, So that to me is the big spiritual journey, is realizing you're not in control. It's very much like recovery, where you kind of learn like, wow, I actually have no control over this disease of mine. And we are in charge of this child, but we don't necessarily have control of them. So what does it look like to love them well, and to love the people around them who are in some ways being very victimized by their behavior? So it's unconditional love for you and for them.
I do. And I think our theology very much directs our parenting. Back when I thought I had all of the rules and all of the ways that I would do it, I had for decades a vision of God that was a disciplinarian. He was waiting to catch me doing the wrong thing. He was waiting to catch me, not doing the right thing. There were consequences. And like, that was the way I viewed God. And I don't even think I realized it, Mary, until having this conversation with you. But when that changed, it was the same time that my theology was changing. And I was realizing that God is not just a disciplinarian. He's not just a father trying to catch me when I'm off, but he loves me and he extends grace and forgiveness. And I think when we can understand that concept, it's so much easier than to parent this way.
Oh yeah. And can I add to that? Like, he created us and then said, it is very good.
Yeah.
And so God delights in us as we are right now. Like he's like that way we get when we see our child's first steps, I feel like is God perennially watching us like, look at her. She's showing up to her podcast. She keeps doing it. She put makeup on. He's like nudging the angels with his elbow, like check her out. And I think we are learning that that's how God sees us and that's how we can see our child and can still hold limits. And I'm not here like unparenting or something like I have a whole course on how to show up and what postures and all that. But I agree with you. Yeah. How you see God. And I think I saw God as, I grew up Catholic before, and I accepted Jesus or became an evangelical Christian, right after 9/11. But growing up, to me, God was like the party host who never is actually in the room you're in. And you're like, I think Jesus is here somewhere. Oh, awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to meet him, but I'm doing all the right things and I'm in his house and I'm sure he likes me, but kind of like a far away, you're good. It's all good. And that's also not the kind of parent you want to be. Like, you really want to get in there, get your hands dirty, delight in this child, root for this child. And so, yeah, it's been a shift in how I see God as well.
The most freeing statement I think maybe, or thought that I ever had was that God made me like I am on purpose, that he created me like this on purpose. So when I can look at my children, I have 2 daughters, when I look at them, and one is highly emotional and all the things, and the other one is just wild. She's just out there. We just never know, and I can look at both of them and all of their silliness and all of their things and go, God did this on purpose. I'm like, okay, then I better figure out how to love this person.
Not only
just as God made her.
Purpose, right. Not only did he do it on purpose, but they are made in his image.
Right.
So these unique things about each kid, because those of us that have more than one child realize how little it has to do with us, but is there an imprint of they, of what God is, and just an expression of all the different creativity. So that's so cool.
That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. All right. Well, on Instagram in stories this week, I asked people to send in questions that they had for you. And so here's one of those questions that's like, well, you tell them, so we don't have to say it. So so us as moms don't have to be the ones, but for those maybe non-parents who want to, like, and I'm quoting, help redirect our spicy ones, be it people in public or grandparents, what is it that they should know about when they try to help us redirect our kids?
Leave us alone. Well, it's a fool's errand.
Podcast. Thank you for going.
It's a fool's errand to think you can impact a spicy one's behavior without a relationship. It's all through relationship, right? So if you are the type of grandparent that shows up once a month and sits on the couch and expects them to sit next to you and visit with you, you don't have the relationship. You haven't been in the trenches. You haven't earned enough of the connection with that child for them not to actually have a very counter response to you trying to get in there. And also, when you bring any kind of judgment, which is probably where they're coming from, you just heap shame on the parent and the child, and nobody does their best work when they're feeling ashamed or judged. So I think if somebody were listening, if a grandparent were listening, I would say that what your child needs, your adult child, the parent needs you to hear them out and just be a sounding board without really giving any advice, and to love on their kid and remind them of what's amazing about their kid. Like, that is your role if you want to equip your daughter or son to be the best parent they can be. And then why don't you take a class? Why don't you take my gentle parenting class, so you can get on the same, you can learn, because we've learned a lot about humans in the last 30 years. And so there are some new ideas, and don't be afraid of them. I think if we're talking to the parents and what are they supposed to say to their parent or this other person, I would start with, like naming the common ground, which is like, you love your grandchild so much. I can feel it. I love how you show up for them. I love that you're here supporting me. And I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your presence in this child's life. And I know you see it, but we're choosing a different path than you took. We are on a different path. Doesn't make yours wrong, but I do need you to respect the path we're on. We're deciding that a child's behavior is communication, and that the thing that they least have, I have, which is regulation. And so really these first few years, we're just working on co-regulating and helping them come to calm. And I don't, I'm not choosing punishment, Mom. And I'm not saying that your way was the wrong way. It's just, I'm going in a different way. Can you respect that, Mom?
Yeah.
And just ask and pause and have it be a dialogue. And that might look like some limits, like, hey, I want you to be the grandparent. I want you to be the one who sneaks the treats to them, or, maybe you don't, maybe it's a whole sugar thing that we need to talk about, but I want you to be the grandparent, which is that loving presence, that person that just delights in you. Let me be the parent. And so if you're struggling, let's have a secret code where you can do something with your finger to let me know that this is feeling out of your comfort zone. And maybe I'll take the child to a separate space, or maybe you can step away and take a walk. Let's talk about what's uncomfortable for you. Likely I'm not going to change what I'm doing, but I do want to give you the chance to take care of yourself as well during this. Cause that's kind of the whole point of how you're parenting.
Yeah. Man, I mean, I joked that I want you to tell them so that we don't have to, but honestly, that is one of the hardest parts of parenting right now. Again, and I'm just speaking to my generation, is there's so many of us who are parenting young kids in front of our parents. And the idea that we're doing it differently, I think often it can come across as, like you just said, either they think that we're telling them, passive aggressively or whatever, that they're doing it wrong. And that's not the case, but it is. We have to, I guess we have to be the ones that have the conversation and that can go first and say, even though it's weird because we're parenting and then trying to teach our parents, but to
and I think it's a conversation that needs to happen outside of the flashpoint. So it's like, hey, Thanksgiving is coming up and I'm so glad we get to be together. And I appreciate you still being the one that hosts. That means so much. I want to make you aware that in our family, we don't make the children finished food. And I know that might be triggering to you, Mom. So I want to talk about it up front and see how I can support you, but also make sure that you don't feel like you need to step in and try and force my child to finish eating, because that's not how our family does it.
Yeah.
And you're basically before you're in it, you're front loading, which is also an amazing thing to do for your child, which is talking about the behavior you hope to see, and then asking that person, how can I support you in behaving that way? And that really works for the spicy one. And it's going to work for grandparents as well.
Yes. It's amazing how things don't change sometimes, right? Well, and I know too, even giving my parents language, or in my in-laws, giving my girls' grandparents language. One of the things that we noticed first when it came to the way that we parent differently was just with hugging. We're a very affectionate family. We hug, but sometimes our kids don't want to hug. I mean, that's all of us, right? Have days where I don't want to give you a hug. And so that was tricky for us to navigate through. So then I just started giving them language, either something like, hey, go hug who you want to hug, or go say goodbye to who you want to say goodbye to, or go give grandma a hug or a high five, and, giving them options. And honestly, they do choose the hug more often than not, but at least I think too, it appears as though I'm doing it for my girls, but I also do believe it helps the adults in the room to remember and go, oh, right, I'm not going to force this.
Yes.
We're doing this differently.
You're saying it out loud, and you might have to say, oh, grandma, did you know in our home, we get to decide for our body, but you've already had that discussion up front so that that grandparent doesn't feel shamed. But yeah, that's beautiful what you're doing. And,
thank you.
And not only are you doing it for them, but you're also kind of doing it for little you, because many of us have had a scenario where we had to do something with our body that we would not have chosen to do. And how loving it is to stand in the gap for your young child and say, no, she doesn't have to hug unless she wants to. You're healing a part of you.
Mary, stop. You're gonna, I'm like tearing up over here.
It's not even some emotion. What's happening?
No, it's not even that specific instance. I'm a hugger. I'll hug everybody. But every time that because I just go into these conversations going like my parents and my kids, and I always forget that little Kristen is part of this. And every time you bring that into the conversation, it just feels so tender and healing. And I just don't know how else to explain it. So just thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, it's lovely.
All right. So sometimes, as many tools and conversations and things as we can have, right? Sometimes it is inevitable that we end up leaving our kids in the care of other people when we can't really control what's going to happen or what the response will be when we're not there. Let's say we have to go out of town or something happens. Is there a way that we can prepare our kids to be under the authority of somebody who parents differently than we do?
That's a big old question. I almost want more examples, but I will say that, I mean, you're modeling all along how you handle authority in your life. So they're watching that. Like, are we talking about young children or are we talking about teenagers? What development?
I think there can be all kinds of things. Let's say at my house, I don't know, I came up with an example. They're allowed to do something. Okay, here's a good example. Here's a great example. My youngest is allowed to go to her room. I mean, they both are, but really it's my youngest that takes advantage. If she's upset, she can scream, she can throw her pillows, she can kick the floor. I mean, she can just have at it and do what she needs to do in her room when she needs to calm down or have a meltdown or just get it out. That's not necessarily the case for other house rules at other places. But this is not an example of, hey, at such and such's house, we don't do this, because when she's in that state, there's no reasoning with her, and all she knows is this is my coping strategy and I'm allowed to do this and I know I won't get in trouble. Yeah. If she's then going to spend a week somewhere where there's a good chance she's going to need to do that.
There's a good chance. There's a few things working in our favor. One of them is masking. One of them is masking that sometimes spicy ones can hold it together in other environments and then they fall apart when they're back with us.
Yeah.
So that may happen. But it's also in that instance up front talking about all the scenarios. Like, what do you think you'll do if this happens? Or what would be a good way to handle this? And like having if she can't, I mean, she needs to have a space she can go to while she's staying with them, right? In that case. Right. So it would be naming that space, and maybe it helps to kind of write it out. Like younger kids love like a kind of a picture book, like you're going to grandma's. At grandma's, we don't play with the yadro. Remember? So we stay out of this room. Where do we play? And you're writing it out. So going over the rules with this person and normalizing that every family has different rules. And some rules are non-negotiable. Nobody gets to touch you where your bathing suit is,
right?
Or whatever that is, there's house rules and then there's body safety rules. And we're kind of butting up against that awful truth that you are in charge, but you're not in control. I mean, many people are like, how do I get my child to behave at preschool? Well, you're not at preschool.
Right.
So it actually frustrates me when the school is like, hey, he's not listening. Okay, well, I'm not there and I don't think he's going to listen a lot more when I'm there. So, but there as a teacher of kindergarten, too, like it is really discombobulating when you have, one spicy one in a group of 25, like most kids, the peer pressure, everybody moves and goes and does something. This kid doesn't. So again, and I would say this for the teacher, and I would say this for this person that's going to watch this child is, oh my gosh, they do really well with leadership opportunities. Like if you say, oh, I want you to sit right next to me here because you'll be grading this paper, or I want you to be the one who is the line leader. Can you do that? Like getting this young kid to use their amazing leadership skills for good will be powerful. I think the last thing I would say about your situation of getting them ready to be under somebody else's supervision is front loading, just talking up front about your expectations. You will have to, ask politely, and but you may find you can do all this and there's still some big old blow up because your kid doesn't have the brain power yet to keep it together. And then the grandparents say, we can't do this, not with this child. And I know so many families that have gone through that phase and they grow out of it. Nobody wanted to watch my little spicy one, and now they cannot get enough of her. So I don't know if I gave very good advice for that one.
No, you did. It's fantastic. I even think the idea of front loading strategies for the caregiver, hey, if she starts crying, ask her to start naming all the pink things in the room. And if distraction is a good one, I think even those kind of things too can help support in those moments.
Yeah. And maybe explaining to them, like a child who's looking for proprioceptive input, like they would be great if you would roll on the floor over top their body before bedtime. Like it just giving them a few concrete things they can do to help this child's body regulate would be great too.
Yeah. So your focus is generally on the spicy one, but like you just mentioned, even with the teacher example, there are a lot of families that have multiple children. So what about the other child, the other children? How can we help them to understand that their sibling is unique and maybe is going to be parented differently than they are?
I recently heard that sibling called the glass child, and it broke my heart because
I don't know that I like that.
I know. They basically can feel like you see right through them because you're always looking at the problem child. You're always dealing with the storm in the room, so you don't notice the sunny beach,
Yeah.
So being aware of that dynamic, that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we may be bringing all of our anxiety and energy to the spicy one, and that can look like a form of love to I call them the mild child. Nobody's all or one of any of these.
Sure.
But I think one thing we can do is we can, a glass child doesn't want to be invisible. They want you to see them. So spending time with them, helping them name some of the feelings, like it must be frustrating to have your sister cry for 20 minutes and make you late to your basketball practice. I wonder what that's like for you. Yeah, I don't like it. And then being okay that they're going to say some negative things about their siblings, and it's way better that they say them to you and you say, I get it. I could see that, versus some of us love to gaslight our children and say, no, that's your best friend. Yeah. No, you love your brother, right? Like that doesn't help anybody. You want
to be their safe space.
Yes, their safe space. And I kind of like thinking of it as like popping a zit. You want to squeeze all that pus out. And the pus is, I can't stand this person who ambushes every family vacation. Tell me more. Tell me what that's like for you. You can't see me, listeners, but I'm squishing my fingers together and grossing out Kristen. So letting them talk, naming some of the feelings they might be too mild to name, like my dear Enneagram 9 son, who's just like, yeah, I'm good. And it's like, are you? Because that was a lot. Like, he has witnessed a lot. Also having special time with just you and your mild child, where you say, I just want it to be the two of us. Let's go. And being really intentional about that once a week. And it can be 15 to 20 minutes, but especially if they know it's coming, they know that they matter enough for you to have named that it's happening. And it might mean you're getting a babysitter, or spicy one's watching a movie, but setting aside that time. And then when the S hits the fan and your spicy one is having a big old meltdown that feels, if not violent, at least emotionally kind of upsetting to be a part of, you can say, oh, hold on a second. I'm going to help so-and-so head out to the room. Why don't you come sit out here? And then you're staying calm, because what's worse than having a spicy one for a sibling is having a mom who loses it when the spicy one acts out. So you can do so much good by you staying calm and sturdy. You've seen it before. You'll see it again. Why don't you step out here? Oh, she's throwing the paperweight. That's okay. We'll be out in just a second. Like fake it till you make it, because it helps that child feel safe.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that there are moms listening right now who are like, that sounds great, but how am I supposed to stay calm? Because there is a certain point that you hit and you boil over. And I know that you have a whole calm class. Is that right?
Yes.
But do you have a tip? Do you have like one tip that they can walk away with of like, This is think of this or do this when you are about to lose your mind.
Yes. I'm going to teach you a French word.
Okay.
Le pause, which just means the pause. I want you to, as much as we can, lengthen out the time between the stimulus of them acting crazy, of us feeling like a failure, and our response, the more time we have to let our body get back to homeostasis. So pausing, telling yourself, this is not an emergency, because your body thinks it is. It's sending out all the warning signs. So pausing and realizing, like, it's not important that I get to them right away or that I try and stop this. I'm just going to give myself like I want you to give yourself, I'm looking for 30 seconds. 30 seconds can change the course of your family. If you can take a moment to say, I'm going to breathe out, 10 times in 30 seconds, even though it feels like there's a war around me. Like I said, it's happened before. It's going to happen again. Nobody's dying. And unless somebody's running out into a street, our body tells us a lot that we're in an emergency when we're not. So just pausing. That's what I want you to practice.
We instituted at our house, and this was only for a season and we haven't needed to do it since, but when my kids were, I don't know, I guess they were like late toddlers. Timeouts at our house were not a punishment, but a timeout meant I'm going to my room to do whatever I need to do to calm down. And mommy would have timeouts as well. And there was a time when it would be the three of us, me and the two girls, my husband was at work or whatever. And I'm like, I just remember I'm going to lose it. Everybody gets a timeout, me included. And I would just go in and shut the door and whatever I needed to do for a couple of minutes until I could breathe and then go back out there. And they just kind of learned this is something that we all do. And guess what? Mom needs it too, because I'm also going to respond in a way that I'm going to regret or is not kind and loving if I don't get it out of my body just the same way that you have to get your ish out of your body,
Yeah, you're describing a sacred pause, and it's going to look different for each person. For some of us, if we tried to go to our room, the spicy one would follow. And so for that person, go ahead and get down on the ground, on your knees, put your head to the ground, put your hand like you're in the crash position, and just start moaning. I'm serious. Or start, because that's really actually good for your nervous system, is to everything starts vibrating. So either it's like, or you can boo, and just make a sound. And your spicy one might climb up on your back or try to stick their face into the little sound cave you've created, but respect that that's what your body might need. Less stimulation. And just take that pause. And it's a good thing, even though it might look, if there were a movie of your life, it's like, what is she doing? She's not doing anything. Our being is way more important to our children than what we do.
Yeah. Well, and let's even circle back to the beginning where you said, we worry so much about what other people think. I think even in moments where we are alone with our kids, there's still that voice going, what are you doing? That judgmental, voice of the outside, like, what are you doing? You're doing this wrong. This doesn't look right. And so I think it's just even back again to that and going that's not real. And it doesn't matter,
It's not real. And again, let me check in with, what does the Holy Spirit say? Yeah. If Jesus were holding my hand while one kid is screaming and the other is beginning to cry from sort of fear and overwhelm, and Jesus were here holding my hand, what would he say? He definitely would not say, you're not a good mom. What's wrong with you? He would start crying too, because he's a big weeper, and he would be like, this is hard. And he would hug you and you guys would start laughing about it. It's really intense, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm going to start picturing Jesus now and just being like, what did you do? Why did you give me this child? But that I love so very dearly. And I can just, that would throw me into fits. So Mary, how can people work with you more if they have listened to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I need more of this? How can they work with you?
Well, a good starting place is to take Calm class. It's $49. It's 1 hour, and it just helps you figure out a calm down recipe, because everybody has a different body, has a different nervous system, has a different background. And so it's just a good space, because I really believe to be the parent you want to be, you have to be able to be calm, kind, and firm. And I have a 1 hour class for each of those, just to kind of get you started in that direction, because they don't necessarily come naturally. especially if you weren't parented by somebody who found that to be important or was equipped to do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll link all of those up in the show notes. So just scroll down, guys, and they'll all be there. Mary, thank you so, so much. This has been a delight.
It's been so fun. Let's do it again.
Let's do it. I told you you would laugh and cry in a conversation with Mary Van Geffen. And if you did not do either or both, then I don't think you were listening well enough. Definitely scroll down below and you can learn more about Mary's 3 classes about how to be calm, how to be kind, and how to be firm. Also, I did find out that she's potentially doing something special for Mother's Day. So be sure to be on the lookout for that as well. Friends, thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate your commitment to listening, to sharing, to giving us feedback. If you would love to leave a review, we would love to read it so much. Really, more than anything, you are our voices. You are our best marketing team. So the more that you tell people to listen to the Becoming Church podcast, the more that it happens, and the more that we can get guests and people that you really want to hear from in these conversations. We are so, so grateful. Thanks for being here.